the two tables to be papers to be tabled, which we'll table. Can I invite Phil McKee, the Acting Director General of Security of the NZSIS, and Andrew Hampton from the GCSB, and incoming Director of the SIS. Congratulations. Can I invite you to make any introductory remarks and introduce any of the rest of the team that you wish to, and then we'll get into questions.
Kia ora, Prime Minister, kia ora tātou, and we are joined by Nikki Hasland, who is the Chief Financial Officer for both of the agencies. Phil and I will do short prepared statements. These are important both for the benefit of the committee, but it's also a chance for us to talk publicly about what has been key focus for us as agencies over the past year. So thank you for the opportunity to update the committee about the work of the Government Communications Security Bureau in this public session. Once again, it has been an operationally demanding year in which the GCSB's signal intelligence and cybersecurity missions have responded to significant and at times unprecedented challenges presented by the increasingly contested world that we live in. We have in the past year witnessed geostrategic competition intensifying right around the world, including in our Pacific region, while serious cyber incidents continue to threaten New Zealand organisations. Aotearoa New Zealand's interests are being challenged by this rise in geostrategic competition, as some states are more readily pursuing objectives in ways that run contrary to the international rules-based order, including through malicious cyber means. This year, we have continued to provide signal intelligence to 19 agencies and their ministers, as well as provide unique cybersecurity capabilities and resilience advice to nationally significant organisations through the National Cybersecurity Centre. As the world becomes more complicated, one of our principal roles is to inform our key decision makers on a broad range of topics with signals intelligence, in accordance with Aotearoa New Zealand's national security intelligence priorities. Peace and stability in the Pacific has been an enduring intelligence focus for successive governments. For the GCSB, this includes intelligence relating to foreign interference in Pacific nations, economic stability and vulnerabilities, and transboundary issues such as climate change, resource exploitation, transnational organised crime, people smuggling, maritime issues, and the impact of COVID-19. Moving now to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. While the extreme low temperatures that froze the front lines over the winter have thawed, opposing forces remain bogged down in an intense high attrition confrontation along vast swathes of eastern and southern Ukraine. Russia has made small territorial gains in recent weeks, but this has been achieved with significant casualties. As we have previously highlighted, malicious cyber activity remains a feature of the conflict. The role of GCSB has been to provide intelligence about the conflict to New Zealand government decision makers. Most of this intelligence is sourced through New Zealand's international partnerships and is supplemented by GCSB's own intelligence. We also set up a dedicated cybersecurity effort to help protect New Zealand organisations from the ever-present threat of malicious cyber activity spanning from the conflict. A unique feature of this conflict has been the unprecedented willingness on the part of our partners, particularly the United States, to provide information to inform the public narrative, including declassified intelligence. This played a significant role in informing and consolidating global support for Ukraine and headed off various false flag and false narrative activities. Last year, our National Cyber Security Centre published its annual cyber threat report, in which we recorded 350 cybersecurity incidents compared to the previous year's 404. The cybersecurity incidents we focus on are those that target organisations of national significance or those that have a national impact. This represents a drop in the overall number of incidents to levels we have seen in recent years. Russia, along with other Eastern European states, are known states of origin or safe harbours to those who conduct sophisticated malicious cyber campaigns, both state-sponsored and criminally motivated. It is likely that a proportion of the malicious actors whose activities typically impact on New Zealand organisations have turned their attention elsewhere as a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Nonetheless, the cybersecurity threats we face continue to be more sophisticated and more impactful, and this reporting year has been no different, with ransomware and supply chain exploitation the most frequently encountered malicious cyber activity. At the same time, much of the malicious cyber activity we see can be prevented through relatively simple mitigations and good cyber hygiene. State-sponsored cyber actors again feature significantly in recorded incidents, with the proportion that can be linked to state actors increasing slightly at 118 incidents, or 34% of the total, compared to 28% in the previous year. This reporting year, the NCSC contributed to the public attribution of two significant state-sponsored campaigns. In July 2021, Minister Little publicly condemned malicious activity targeting Microsoft Exchange by state actors from the People's Republic of China. And in July 2022, Minister Mahuta publicly condemned a campaign of destructive activity against Ukraine by Russian-based malicious actors. The NCSC's cyber defence capabilities continue to help reduce the harm to New Zealand organisations from malicious cyber activity, with our cyber defences having prevented more than $33 million worth of harm to nationally significant organisations in the financial year, bringing the total harm reduced since 2016 to $317 million. In November 2021, we launched our award-winning malware-free network service, which has helped disrupt over 290,000 cyber threats. As Government Chief Information Security Officer, or GCISO, my focus is on understanding and helping mitigate the key information security threats and vulnerabilities facing the public sector. In the past year, this has involved working with global cloud companies to ensure they build New Zealand's information security standards into their products used by government agencies. We have also been working alongside our overseas partners to counter the threat posed to the New Zealand government's cryptographic security by quantum computers and their potential to break encryption and expose classified communications. We currently have a program of work underway alongside 19 government agencies that use classified systems to implement the new encryption standards to stay ahead of those threats. As I've talked before, the GCSB continues to make a unique and valuable contribution to global efforts to counter terrorism and violent extremism. While the GCSB's signals intelligence role is primarily focused offshore, we are working more proactively with our domestic partners in line with the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Christchurch attacks commentary. Obviously, our signals intelligence mission represents the more classified end of our function, but I will briefly touch on three examples of recent domestic counter-terrorism work that paint a picture of how our unique capabilities and authorities can assist domestically focused agencies. This is not something we've talked about before in public. One operation involved an individual making bomb threats last year with an implied ideological motivation. Another operation involved a New Zealand-based adherent to white identity violent extremism who was displaying behaviour of increasing concern online, while the third involved an individual claiming to be a white identity violent extremist making threats to use firearms and explosives at a public event. In all three operations, the GCSB was able to combine lead information from other agencies with our unique technical capabilities to help identify the individuals who had each taken great care to anonymise themselves online. we were able to work with police and NZSIS to develop a clearer picture of the real-world threat they posed, and in the case of the third operation, the gun and bomb threat to a public event, we were able to provide information that supported the appropriate action to be taken by the police. The GCSB has maintained a high operational tempo over the past year against a backdrop of significant disruption. This has included not only the ongoing impact of COVID-19 and higher levels of staff turnover than previous years, but also having to significantly reduce the number of New Zealand intelligence staff in our main building for earthquake remediation. While these disruptions have impacted some of our projects, the GCSB has been able to maintain its core operational services throughout and progress key initiatives. We are currently finalising our new organisational strategy that will position us to continue to provide intelligence advantage and cyber resilience to successfully navigate an increasingly unpredictable world. The Bureau looks forward to briefing the committee on this new strategy later in the year, as well as making an unclassified version available publicly. Finally, before I hand over to Phil, I will talk briefly about the people of GCSB. Against the backdrop of ongoing disruptions, our workforce has continued to grow and change. A strong focus for me personally is striving towards a workforce that is truly representative of the community we serve and a workplace that is inclusive and which values the different perspectives diversity brings. Indeed, this is something that has been recognised jointly with NZSIS with the Diversity Awards category win last year. Undoubtedly, the past year has presented a share of challenges, but the professional people of GCSB have risen to meet them, and I have been proud to lead them. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, Prime Minister. I'm Phil McKee, the Acting Director General of Security for the NZSIS, and thank you for the opportunity to address you all today. I'd like to take just a short moment to acknowledge Rebecca Kitteridge's outstanding service to our organisation. Rebecca has performed a transformational role in the history of NZSIS during what was a most turbulent national security environment in decades. She brought an exemplary set of personal values to this role and has been an outstanding role model to our people. We also look forward to working with Andrew when he arrives on the 17th and all the skills and knowledge that he will bring to the role. This year has been another challenging year dealing with the impacts of COVID-19 and a tight labour market, all whilst being faced with a diverse, complex and rapidly changing violent extremist threat and espionage. When we look at the threat environment and try to understand the factors affecting the environment, one key overarching theme emerges. That is, many of the threats we are facing stem in some ways from increased strategic competition. This marks a clear shift in the dynamics of our national security. Domestic terrorism still gives us cause for concern, but the transnational terror is not where it has been in the last decade. However, there is potential for that to change again rapidly. We have seen competition between states intensify over the past year, and this will have security implications for New Zealand for some time. Foreign states will be looking for a strategic or intelligence advantage in this rivalry. What that means for us and in our home region is more frequent attempts to disrupt and interfere in our democracy, our economy, our information environment, and our social fabric. Turning to violent extremism, I mentioned the threat of domestic terrorism remains firmly on our radar. The 51 shahada from the terrorist attacks on 15th of March 2019, as well as those who were injured or traumatised, their families and their communities are always in our thoughts. In November last year, the national terrorism threat level was revised to low, but that does not mean there is no threat. We consider there is a realistic possibility that there are individuals in our country who have the intent as well as the ability to develop the capability to conduct an attack. The lowering of the threat level only reflects that we are not currently seeing the same concerning cases of individuals mobilising on a path to mobilisation to violence, and again, this could change rapidly. Our investigative effort remains evenly split between identity-motivated, faith-motivated and politically motivated extremists. A more recent trend is when someone is engaging in violent extremist behaviour in New Zealand, it tends to mostly take the form of expressing support for various ideologies. Our job is to try and determine whether they are serious about following through on their beliefs by committing a violent act. That's a painstaking task, especially with the vast amount of hate being expressed online. We see both inflammatory and threatening violent abuse in online spaces every day. Typically, it is targeted at a wide variety of people from already marginalised communities. Even though it is difficult to understand the true intent behind these threats, the vast majority are unlikely to result in real-world violence. It remains disturbing, however, especially when we see threats from young people, which unfortunately remains fairly common. When signs of violent extremist behaviour begin to emerge in real-world behaviours, that is when the public is in a better position to help us. Our guide, Kia Matara Kina Tohu, or Know the Signs, which we published in October, is an important resource for raising awareness in the public. It shows the kinds of behaviours and activities we find most concerning and how to let us know when it is seen. We are pleased with the response we've had since the launch of this guide. Turning to foreign interference and espionage, this is a threat that gives us increasing cause for concern and another area where we feel there is a need to raise more awareness. We only see a small number of states conducting interference against New Zealand, but some of those are persistent and have the potential to cause significant harm. To be clear, we regard foreign interference as actions by a state that have the intentions to influence, disrupt, or subvert our national interests by covert, corruptive, deceptive, or threatening means. Normal diplomatic activities or upfront lobbying don't fall within the foreign interference definition. Some of the most insidious examples concern harassment of ethnic communities in New Zealand who speak out against the actions of a foreign government. There are examples where information is collected on them and used to threaten whānau members in their own country, home country. We have also seen attempts at foreign interference against university academics, local government officials, and the media. Foreign interference should not be tolerated. It is deliberately calculated and has the intent of undermining our democracy and the values we hold dear. The problem is serious, but there are steps we can take to make ourselves more harder targets for this sort of activity. One of the most effective ways we can counter foreign interference is by shining a light on it. If more people are aware of foreign interference, including the tactics used and the goals a foreign government is trying to achieve, then it will struggle to maintain a foothold in Aotearoa. To achieve this, we need to be doing more to raise public understanding of foreign interference and espionage and the damage that it can result. In a recent survey conducted for the Long-Term Insights briefing on national security, New Zealand has said they want to hear more from the intelligence agencies about the threats we face so they can be more prepared. We know too how the Royal Commission of Inquiry hope to see a more mature discussion develop about national security matters in our society. As one way to contribute to that discussion, we are aiming to publish an NZSIS Security Threat Environment report in coming weeks. This is a document produced by our analysts to show what we, as a security intelligence agency, consider are some of the factors influencing our threat environment. It will be the first time we have published a consolidated threat assessment like this, and I think this information will be useful to a wide range of groups in our society, including communities, businesses, universities, and the wider government, and indeed the media. I would like to spend a short time on some other areas where we have made an impact. This is an incredible place to work, where our people do incredible things each and every day. Our intelligence and our close critical relationships with New Zealand Police and GCSB has led to the disruption of potential attacks as well as inspiring interventions to remove someone from a violent extremist pathway. On the counter interference and espionage side, we have been able to identify individuals undertaking intelligence activity and cultivating strategic relationships on behalf of foreign states. Our insights have been shared in a way that has limited their impact and ability to cause harm. Our protective security requirements team continue to provide excellent advice which helps government and other institutions get in front of the threat and make themselves less vulnerable. A highlight in the past year we are proud of is the publication of a guidance to help organisations conduct their own due diligence assessments on their business, research or investment decisions. In conclusion, our security environment is throwing up challenges that could not have been foreseen even just a few years ago, and the environment keeps changing. In spite of this fast-moving environment, NZSIS has been able to quickly adapt, pivot when required and respond. This is testament to the unrelenting commitment of our highly trained and professional people, but it also reflects their supreme level of dedication to our mission of keeping New Zealand and New Zealanders safe and secure. Increasingly, this is becoming a mission we are learning to share with the rest of New Zealand. We are also working with a broader set of partners to achieve better security outcomes. We want to earn and maintain the trust and confidence of New Zealanders to do this, to do what it takes under the law to keep them safe. Ngā mihi nui. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thanks very much for the overview. I'll throw straight to the opposition for questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Mr Hampton, I was struck by your description of the increasing regularity of cyber attacks.
Yes.
And you mentioned specifically that that increases the need for mitigations for cyber hygiene. What's your assessment of how well public sector agencies are doing that?
Yeah.
And have there been any instances where a simple preventative measure such as a patch could have prevented an attack?
Yeah, there'll be limits to what I can talk about in terms of specific incidents, but if you look at the threatscape, there's at least three big things happening. Firstly, the actors are getting more sophisticated, both state and non-state actors. Secondly, we are seeing what we call the threat surface grow significantly, or the attack surface grow significantly, as more organisations, more people do more online, and also as they outsource more of their services. And then the third point, unfortunately, as you've pointed out, we are still seeing a reasonably high number of organisations who are compromised because of weak passwords, because of not updating patches. Now, the Bureau is really focused on how can we work with organisations to help them increase their resilience. We provide an awful lot of information through information exchanges. We also have regularly available guidance. Within government, I have some particular levers. I'm Government Chief Information Security Officer, so I get to set standards and monitor agency compliance. What we have seen, and here I'm getting to your main question, we have seen a steady increase over the years in those agencies' compliance. I think we're starting to see that plateau a bit now. Partly that's because the easy stuff's been done. Partly it's because they're on legacy systems which are harder to patch and the like and will require investment. What we've been trying to do is make it easier for those government organisations to comply with the standards we set. So something we have done recently is agreed with Microsoft and Amazon for them to build into their cloud offerings the minimum government standards, which makes it easier for organisations to meet those standards. So look, I think it's an uneven picture, and it requires ongoing vigilance because the threatscape keeps changing.
Thank you. And just in a completely separate question,
yes,
in relation to domestic terrorism, you
yes,
mentioned 3 incidents the agency was involved in, or potential incidents. In those instances, were charges laid and were prosecutions successful?
Phil's probably best placed to talk specifically about it. Certainly in the case of one of those incidents, which I can talk about, it's been in the public arena, there were charges laid. Phil, you might want to talk about the range of interventions though.
Yeah, so there is a big range of interventions here, and the first and foremost is trying to take people with that mobilisation past to violence when it comes to our counter-terrorism effort where that's possible. So we work with other agencies to provide that information for them to act on that. But there also have been, as Andrew said, a number of media interest in recent examples where individuals have been charged.
I picked up on here, you said, Andrew, that you were granted or you won some award for your malware software, right? The question I immediately had is, what was the award? Who was making the judgment?
Yes, okay. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Brownlee.
I thought you're a security agency and are you sharing your malware, your programs out with the world?
In this case, yes, we are. So that related to this cyber disruption service called Malware-Free Networks. Now, you would be very familiar with Cortex because it was something that we developed at a time when you were in government. That involved us using classified information to help protect organisations by essentially sitting on their networks. Malware-Free Networks is a new product which involves us actually sharing the threat material and some of the technology with a range of internet service providers and network operators so they can then use it to protect their customers. So it's no longer the Bureau having to sit on people's networks, it's us providing the threat feed to organisations who can then get to hundreds of customers. And yet we entered that in a cybersecurity competition primarily to promote it, and there's been high take-up. I guess it goes to the point that's very relevant to what Phil was talking about. You know, national security is not something you can just rely on our agencies to do. We need to partner with others, in particular with communities and with the private sector, and that was an example of that.
Does that, though, give an opportunity for the nefarious actors to work their way around a program like that?
No, what we do is we get the threat feeds to a level of classification where it is safe to share it. Normally what it would be a malicious actor may have what's called a indicator of compromise or a signature, like their fingerprint. And so we share that with these network operators and service providers, and then they know to block that coming through. So the actor already knows it because it's their fingerprint. Now, of course, they may change it. That's why we need to be vigilant. But no, it's not sharing classified threat information or classified technology.
And for Mr. McKee, you mentioned the public being more aware of the goals the foreign government is trying to achieve with some of their activities in New Zealand. Have you got, if you're going to share it with the public, what would be something you could share with us today that would be a goal of a foreign government trying to achieve in New Zealand?
I think one of the first things I would say is that often this is a really long-term, enduring partnership that foreign actors are trying to create with individuals. So it might be to gain a relationship with someone thinking that they will be put in an influential role or a position in the future. And that's what makes this hard in many cases. So one of the first things to do is if there is just any persistent engagement that is out of normal, if it goes into questions that seem strange, then what things like some of our advice do is aims to provide guidance for come and talk to us, either through our online sort of portal or the likes, and then we can assist in helping with that. We also have a very strong protective security focus and capability in the organisation that can help a lot of other agencies and government departments and the likes.
So how do you manage the potential for almost a nationwide paranoia if you go too far down?
And that's certainly not what we're trying to achieve here at all. These are acts of a foreign state. They are not the communities that we have in New Zealand. The communities in New Zealand are wonderful people who are always doing, wonderful things for this country. This is purely around the state trying to, in a coercive, disruptive, in a covert way, influence the behaviours of people in New Zealand, influencing their decision-making, influencing their views on particular topics.
So if you were to provide advice to members of the public about what to look for and how to guard against that, what would that advice be?
Yeah, certainly if it, in some cases, it can be quite obvious and quite forceful. You might find, as we've seen in some cases, that people are being threatened. Individuals in communities are being threatened that if they say something which normally is something against that foreign state, then there will be repercussions. So, of course, we want people to let us know. Let us or police, but let us know so that we can work with it. So sometimes it is that obvious. But otherwise it goes back to what I said before, that if suddenly you have representation or individuals who are being more persistent with their relationship with you, are asking strange questions, or asking what you do, or what your role is, or what you might be working on, that might be normal. So this is where it becomes very challenging. It might be normal, but if it seems strange and it seems suspicious, then please let us know.
Do you have any particular commentary around social media that the public should be aware of?
In terms of violent extremism, we are seeing, as I said in the opening remarks, sadly we are seeing a lot of hate. Obviously what we're concerned as an agency is those individuals that might be in amongst that noise who are mobilising to a violent extremist path. So in the violent extremist world, the guide that I talked about is a fantastic opportunity for members of the public, organisations to look at what are the behaviours, what are the things you might see, including on an online environment, and help us by reporting those things. Again, some of it might be normal and accepted, and understandable when it's investigated, but at least give us or the police a chance to look at that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Just on that, the document you produced on knowing the signs and the indicators of potential threat or risk. What can you just explain the process you're going through for disseminating that, the engagements you're undertaking to get the resource out and get the message out?
Thanks, Minister. So we released this at the back end of last year, and it was a fairly soft launch at the moment because we're still in the process of releasing it in a more broader path. So it was up on our website. We've been engaged with communities, certain communities, particularly the Muslim community had significant input into the design of this document. And we're now working more broadly through our protective security arm to work with a wider range of government departments, academic institutions, to be able to use it more broadly. Of course, we've also worked very closely with agencies like police, customs, corrections, and the likes with this document. The uptake so far has been very good, and we've got more and more interest as people are approaching us to learn more about it, and we'll be certainly taking more and more of those opportunities to do it. And we're certainly also seeing, whilst early days, a better quality of leads information that we are getting. And that's a big part of this. It's around the quality that we're getting in leads information, not necessarily the quantity as such.
Just one other additional point about social media. Prime Minister, there's been a lot of coverage around things like TikTok at the moment, and as I think everyone's well aware, GCSB provides those standards and advice to government agencies to help those government agencies make informed decisions about the types of technology services they have. We do have some advice coming out shortly specifically on social media. It is still neutral in terms of particular countries or particular products, but it provides hopefully some relevant advice to those government agencies, and it will be available to the public about the things they should consider when they are looking at downloading a particular app, particularly for government-related work.
Do you want to give us a quick précis of what it's going to say?
Look, I probably would rather wait till it's been finalised, but the point that I do want to emphasise is it still will have emphasis on individual agencies using that advice and then applying it to their particular situation. So if we're talking about something like TikTok, there's a lot of stuff in the media, as you know, about potential data harvesting and the like. And some agencies have already made decisions informed by our advice and their own risk assessments not to use them. But there are other agencies, for example, in education, where they still use TikTok in a way that's not connected to their system at all, so it doesn't, create a risk, to communicate with tens of thousands of students. So that's why it's going to be focused mainly on considerations you should be looking at. But I think obvious things are, where does the data go? What are you giving up when you sign off on these permissions? Because unfortunately, often it's actually in black and white that your data is going to be taken offshore and people just don't read it. So it's about vigilance.
Sure. James.
Yeah, thanks. This has come up, for a number of years as the blurry line between state actors and non-state actors, and of course you're legislatively constrained to dealing with state actors. But a lot of the things that you've been talking about this morning, whether that's hate speech, extremism, foreign interference, disruption, election interfering, these are not isolated buckets, right? There's a sort of essentially technology-enabled disruption, and some of which is social media driven, and there is a blurry line between state actors and non-state actors, criminal networks, and actually some of the social media platforms, and so. And yet the end result is the same, right? Whether it's whether it's clearly a state actor behind it or something non-state-ish, the impact in this country is the same, right? Whether it's election interference or hate speech or anything like that. So how is that evolving? Because we kind of every 12 months we kind of come back to this conversation, and I recognise that the technology and the behaviour of both the state actors and the non-state actors is also evolving.
Yeah. Look, the first point, Mr. Shaw, that I do want to clarify, for the Bureau, our mandate in terms of cybersecurity is threats to organisations of national significance or cyber incidents that could have a national impact. So we are able to take steps to mitigate, to respond to threats from criminal actors as much as we are from state actors when it comes to people trying to steal information, trying to cause disruption. Indeed, even though the number of incidents involving state actors is high, some of the high-profile events that we've seen recently, such as those ransomware attacks, are likely to be criminal groups. So we are focused on them. What I know you're concerned particularly about is in that social media space, and we're very aware of that environment. It does, as Phil outlined, feed into the violent threat scape, but there are good reasons why agencies like ours, with our intrusive powers, don't have a role in monitoring who's going to which website. So we need to be aware of the context. We need to be well connected in with other agencies, with the public, but there has to be some link to mobilising to violence or state interference for us to be able to engage those intrusive powers that we have.
And I think for us, we often can get to a fairly reasonable assessment of confidence around whether a state is in behind what we're seeing from influence in New Zealand. And I have some amazing people, investigators, who spend their day working through this. And often the links can be made that it's reasonable certainty that there is a state in behind this. And certainly that's where our partnerships and all come in, international partnerships with other countries and the likes, because lots of countries are going through this at the moment, and countries are working very closely on these things to provide other partners with indications. There's some really high quality research that has
been undertaken post the protests. And, the original research showed that, New Zealanders were consuming a higher proportion of Russia Today generated, misinformation, if you like, than other countries. But when you picked into the research, it was all being circulated by New Zealanders. It was a relatively small number of New Zealanders who were getting that and processing and spreading it around. It wasn't the, Russian actors doing it directly.
Well, I guess that's my question.
Yes.
Is that so much of this is indirect?
Yes.
And I mean, some of it's clearly direct.
Yes.
But also some of it is not. Yeah. But that isn't to say that the state actor sitting in the background isn't very pleased.
Yes. That's still the intended effect.
Yes.
Exactly. That's right. That there is a strategy here, even if it's being perpetuated by non-state actors. There is actually a state that sits several arms removed in the background, which kind of actually leads to a resourcing question, right? Because we are dealing here with a variety of state and non-state actors who are considerably larger and better funded.
And our partners, our overseas partners, are very aware of this, and I can't talk the specifics about it, but steps sometimes are taken at source. But when it gets out in the wild, when it's everyday New Zealanders circulating this information around, it's not only very difficult, but it does. I wouldn't say it is the role of our agencies to be directly involved in trying to police that.
Different topic. Obviously, critical to the work of both agencies is your relationships with our Five Eyes partners. Just give a bit of an indication about what the state of those relationships are, and both working both ways, the contributions we make and what we also get from those relationships. Do you want to go first, Lee?
Thanks, Minister. I think the relationships are great and continue to be great. From many reasons, I think there's a real realisation amongst the Five Eyes, even more so than normal, that many of these threats do cross borders across the globe, that there is a growing amount of threats that require everyone to work even better together to be able to mitigate against threats. And it's broader than just the Five Eyes too, in the sense of many other countries that we have partnerships with are also really important to this conversation now. So I think the sharing, I think the relationships are in a really good position.
Just on some of your comments, following on from James's stuff, given that this is an election year, do you have a particular program of work to ensure that there is no interference in New Zealand's political process?
Yes, so both agencies are engaging with the Electoral Commission. Key focus for the Bureau is around cybersecurity, protecting their systems, just like we did with the census and other major events from cyber attacks. So we're involved with that. The service are involved from a protective security perspective. We also will be doing briefings to political parties, as we have done in the past, around cybersecurity, around foreign interference. And then across government, there's a national security response to the election that we are part of as well.
You've also got a very high staff turnover across your two agencies. Do you do exit interviews with staff who are leaving? And if you do, what are the predominant reasons for people exiting?
Yes, what I'm pleased to report is, whilst we had exceptionally high turnover, both agencies, around 20% last year, as a result of a number of steps we have taken, we are back down to around the public sector average. It's for the Bureau, it's about 13%, still a bit high. In terms of exit interviews, not everyone fills them out, and the strongest theme is people are going for career development or more pay somewhere else, and that's because our staff have skills that are highly valued. The steps that we took, though, were a direct response to that, and as I said, are having a positive impact.
Yeah, I think over the COVID period, like many agencies experienced, we pretty much had no attrition, understandably. And then we sort of had a period of high attrition which was almost the workforce catching up on movement, I think, in some respects. But from the service perspective, we're now down below 10% attrition, so our attrition rate, like our GCSBs, has dropped off significantly. And certainly what we didn't see was people leaving because they didn't enjoy the mission. I think that still came through very strongly, that people loved the work. But there was this sort of natural movement that got stifled by COVID, and certainly that caused us a peak for a period of time.
And a few of them are coming back. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, which is something we've noticed in recent months as well. Just missed the little, on the 5 Eyes thing, look, the only other thing that I'd add is, whilst there's limits on what we can talk about in this forum, as we discussed in the previous forum, we get huge assistance from our partners. We also are making contributions in certain areas which are highly valued to them. What I want to emphasise, though, is everything that our agencies does is in accordance with New Zealand's law and New Zealand's priorities. There's just times when they overlap with our partners, often increasingly so.
James.
Just one more. For both agencies, you're obviously operating to the same set of priorities. And there are 13 of them, which feels like a lot of priorities, given the intensity of resource that's required to deal with some of them in particular. How are you prioritising between your priorities?
I'll go first, and I'll hand over to Phil, because it's a different story for the two agencies. So first thing is, I guess this is relevant to both agencies. We focus on only the stuff that we can do. We don't duplicate what other agencies can do, because those priorities, of course, apply to all of the agencies in the national security area. So we work closely with police, we work closely with NZDF, we work closely with MFAT, not to duplicate it. So that's the first point. The second thing for the Bureau, there's a division between what are those priorities where we are the conduit for partner intelligence. So we would receive intelligence reports every week that relate to all of the intelligence priorities that we then curate and send across the system. When it comes to our own collection, the stuff that only we can do, we focus on the domestic gaps, we focus on the international gaps. So it will be no surprise to you that what's occurring in our region is a priority for us. Geostrategic competition, as it's playing out domestically in the region, is a priority for us. Counter-terrorism, I've already talked about, where, as the Royal Commission said, we should be more proactive working domestically. We make those international contributions. Support to military operations for the Bureau is sort of a bedrock contribution that we make. And then lastly, as I talked about in the previous session, transnational crime is an increasingly important area where we've found ways in which we can add to what they do. When there's a threat to New Zealanders' life, that always gets high on the list.
Yeah, I think I'd only just add to that in the sense of, obviously, first and foremost, we focused on those areas that our legislation talks about, and national security, counter-terrorism, foreign interference. Many of those national priorities, there's overlaps to them, so the work we're doing actually contribute to many, which is an important point. At the tactical level for us as a security intelligence agency, we have strong prioritisation process, as you can imagine, as an operational agency, that we work very closely with partners like GCSB, and in the counter-terrorism space, obviously significantly with police. And as you expect, as an operational agency, we have to make calls all the time about where those priorities go. But as Andrew said, where there's a threat to life type scenario, then that automatically becomes a priority.
Thank you. There's been discussion about an increased level of threat against members of Parliament. Have you had any observations relevant to that, either from a domestic terrorism perspective or from a foreign interference perspective?
I think more broadly, there is absolutely a theme of anti-authority happening globally, and that's playing out in New Zealand. And that's against parliamentarians, senior officials, and that underpinning of threats of violence and a lot of noise, a lot of online hate towards that is certainly a significant factor within the New Zealand threat environment at the moment. And obviously that requires us to work really, really closely within our mandate and working with agencies like police to be able to, one, identify those threats in advance, but also as they're playing out tactically to be able to provide information intelligence and to work with partners to mitigate against those threats. But certainly anti-authority sentiment is significant globally and within New Zealand.
And MPs and ministers are prime targets for cybersecurity, and that's why we work closely with parliamentary services and others around that as well.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, we've just got to wait for everyone to leave, and then we have a couple of resolutions to make, which will be relatively straightforward.